Welcome to this webinar of the ICA, the International Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design Association. The ICA is a professional, non-profit, global organization for all things related to CPTED. This webinar is one of many programs run by the ICA for preventing crime and creating safer places. My name is Meta Mihnjaj, and I'm Executive Director of the ICA. I invite you to take advantage of the many programs we offer by joining the ICA. You can use the link provided on the screen or contact us if you have any more questions. Also, before we start, a brief disclaimer that the views expressed in this presentation belong to our guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the position of the ICA. The ICA does not assume legal responsibility for the speaker's statements, the intellectual property, or the information presented today. Okay, let's begin with the webinar. I'm excited to welcome all of you today. Our attendees, you are welcome to say hello while the chat is still open at the bottom of your screen, and let us know where you're coming from. So welcome to all of you. Welcome also to my fellow panelists, Dr. Norma Gutierrez from Mexico and Dr. Shamir Rajadvrai from Malaysia. And of course, our moderator, Dr. Manjari Khanna Kapoor. I will now hand over to Manjari to say a few words and to welcome all of you, and of course start the webinar. Over to you, Manjari. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matea, and a very I wish namaste to everybody from India, whichever part of the world, whatever the time. Namaste is appropriate across the world. I am Dr. Manjari Khanna Kapoor. I am a director at the ICA from India, and I will be your moderator for this session, and we'll try to make it as engaging as possible. We welcome all our viewers from the globe to a discussion on CPTED from a criminologist's perspective. So before we plunge into the session, just an overview of the next 60 to 90 minutes with all of you. We will have presentations, short ones from each of our esteemed panelists, followed by a panel discussion around the questions received from the registrants and also live questions as they start pouring in, as you people start sharing. Questions can be added in the chat box at any time and they will be taken up in the necessary order. Please highlight if you want the question directed to a particular person and also the details of who is asking the question. We may not be able to address all the questions depending upon how many. And for all such queries, we will be happy to engage with you after the webinar by mail or phone, whatever is convenient. You can write into our contact details mentioned on the promotional material at any time or our personal ID. So now allow me to give you a very brief introduction to the title for the webinar today. It's pertinent, I find here, because I'm not from the field, that I share with you a definition of criminology. Anybody who's not part of the field, just like me, can have different definitions for the term. And the one that is supposed to be accurate as per my panelists here, it is supposed to be the scientific study of crime. That's one. Crime as a social phenomena. Of criminals, that's two. And of penal treatment. So this encompasses a study of social and individual criminal action. And let's try and see what our panelists have to say with that perspective in mind. So very happily, let's get going with our webinar right away. And it gives me great, immense pleasure to welcome our first panelist for the day, Dr. Norma Gutierrez. Thank you, Norma. Can you wave out to our audience? So Dr. Norma is a doctorate in criminology. She's a member of the Latin American Association of Legal and Forensic Psychologists and a head of psychology in the coordination of social assistance for children in conflict with the criminal law of Guanajuato. Did I pronounce it correctly, Norma?
Yes,
Okay,
It's good.
excellent.
Thank you.
So it's over to you, Norma, to set the ball rolling for the rest of the evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Give me a moment, please. I'm sorry. Give me a moment.
No worries, Norma. We could see the slides.
Thank you. Can you see the slide now?
Yes, you need to go into slideshow mode.
This is a moderate view. You
Uh,
can see that?
yeah, but you can go into full slide view.
Okay. Thank you. You can see the second slide.
Yes, you start in slideshow mode from the beginning, and then you can start.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Norma Gutierrez. I'm from Mexico. I'm psychologist and doctorate in criminology too. It's a pleasure to me to be here. Thanks to the International CPTED Association and its president Macarena Rao for this opportunity. To the high level of violence experienced in Latin America, particularly in Mexico, the incorporation of CPTED methodology is very appropriate to have crime prevention strategies based on scientific evidence. CPTED is the acronym for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, and its methodology emerged from environmental criminology in three main theories: rational choice, routine activities, and criminal pattern. First generation CPTED provide principles such as territoriality, natural surveillance, immigration law, and access control. In this generation, CPTED examines ways in which future of the environment provide opportunities for crime problems and attempts to avoid, reduce, or eliminate these opportunities by anticipating or changing aspects of the physical space, as well as the expectation of use of that place. As a police trainer, the postulates of the fifth generation are the most important for the task of police. Fifth generation CPTED was criticized for an imbalance toward reducing opportunities in physical spaces. The CPTED principles of second generation include social cohesion, community culture, connectivity, and threshold capacity, which for the Latin America region is summarized in community participation. Community ties are very strong in Latin America, but in a positive and negative sense. As you can see, this generation is related to interactionist criminology and, of course, community prevention. New generation CPTED introduced a holistic model centered on neighborhood liability and conceptualization of human needs according to Maslow, and proposed 4 sustainability strategies: environmental sustainability, social sustainability, economic sustainability, and public health sustainability. In Latin America, mental health is gained special importance and work is currently being done on post-pandemic stress. In criminology, this type of prevention is close to psychosocial prevention. The application of CPTED methodology confirmed that neighborhood residents are who can best define the problems and suggest research topics. In Latin America, this is called a native expert. Cloud of Dreams, developed in 2006 by Dr. Macarena Rao and Carlos Gutierrez Vera, is a methodology in which native experts project their needs through graphic expressions. For example, in the last image of the slide, a girl from Mexico expressed, "I want a school without bullying." The CPTED methodology is based on a project cycle that includes 4 stages: diagnosis, design, implementation, and evaluation. The ICA implemented a professional certification program for practitioners that develops basic skills in research and data collection. This led to the ICA CPTED standard, which is an advance for the alignment of some global methodologies. CPTED methodology, through its 3 generations, account different levels of prevention that criminology also defines as social, situational, community, and psychosocial. The crimes against women in Latin America region is one of the highest in the world. For this reason, Dr. Macarena Rao published a CPTED guide for women. Scientific evidence has shown that women are the best thermometers of perception of urban insecurity. And this is a proposal that leans toward feminist criminology. Image illustrates the CPTED Master Plan for Women's Safety in Zacatecas, Mexico. Women reported that they felt safer walking in the company of other women, so it was decided to create a circuit of murals of women with the aim to reducing fear of crime and increasing their perception of safety. Latin America is an active region in CPTED practice, and this year, the ICA International Conference will be held in Brazil on October 30 and 31. You're cordially invited. Greetings to Mercedes Escudero, and we hope the summit brings together the world leaders of CPTED. This has been my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you for that really crisp and brief, but very, very informative presentation. I'm sure the viewers enjoyed it. I love the connection you made with between criminology and the points of CPTED. Excellent. Thank you so much. And I will request all our viewers to please start posting their questions, which might be bubbling in their minds now. Put them in the Q&A section, please, so that we can take them up after the panelists are done with their presentation. I will now call upon our next panelist for the day, for the evening, Dr. Shamir Rajadurai. He is a criminologist. He likes to call himself, he is an ICA director, by the way, from Malaysia. And he calls himself a criminologist working at the grassroots of crime. And that's a very interesting definition, Shamir. He works with property developers, architects, municipal councils, town planners, engineering firms, and so on and so forth. He's promoting CPTED on very different levels. And I'll call in Shamir to please take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thank you very much, Dr. Manjari, and welcome everyone. Selamat malam semua, those who are Malaysians. I'd just like to wish everyone a very good evening. To the rest of the world, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Shamir Rajadurai from Malaysia, part of the ICA as well. What we will be talking about today, I'll be just giving you all a perspective, of course, of CPTED through the eyes of criminologists, right? And what I just want to talk about are some of the processes that some criminologists use. Again, these are processes which probably I use myself, but again, I'm not speaking for all criminologists, but I just want to explain what are some of the processes that are usually used by criminologists to better apply CPTED so that there would be more success during the applications, right? But what I wanted to maybe give people an idea about is maybe a little bit about crime in Malaysia. And of course, looking at the index crime in Malaysia, one of the highest contributors of that index crime is actually motorcycle theft. And of course, this differs from different parts of the world. Some parts of the
Shamil, do
world
you
might...
want to share your screen?
Yes, in a minute. And of course, some parts of the world, you might not have these problems as you have different types of motorcycles. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you now how motorcycles get stolen in Malaysia. So this is a video that you're going to see on how easily and how quickly a motorcycle can get stolen in Malaysia. And this is one of the most common things which are happening. Motorcycle theft contributes between 30 to 33% of the index crime in Malaysia. As you can see, it just takes a few seconds. And now he's going to go away with that motorcycle. Right, so that's how fast motorcycle theft can happen. I'm just going to share maybe another one, just so that everybody can understand again how fast this happens. So Dan, he has started the bike, and now he's going to go off with it. Right, so it's one of the problems, and maybe one of the things that most of you have noticed is that there's probably no proper parking space for the motorcycle. So I just wanted to go maybe share with you what are some of the processes that I've taken when we apply CPTED through a criminologist's eyes. Right. So of course, the first thing is we understand and we identify the crime patterns, right? So we identify the location, the types of crime, and also we also look at the circumstances in which they occur. So this analysis, of course, determines what are some of the environmental factors that are contributing to the criminal opportunities. The next part is we understand the environmental and also the social influences for that. Right. So when we look at building layouts, lighting, surveillance, like what we looked at earlier, that motorcycles got stolen. We have to look at all that. Like one of the things we noticed is that again there was no proper parking spot. Right. So what I'm also going to share is some of the projects that we've done before, and one of the things was try to combat motorcycle theft, right? And so this was some of the processes that we followed, right? Then of course we look at some of the criminological theories. Dr. Norma Gutierrez covered a few, but of course it goes beyond that. It's not just normal routine activities and rational choice theories. We have to look at many other theories. You're looking at maybe sometimes social disorganization theories, all that. So we have to look at what exactly are the criminological theories that can be applied to better understand why that area is suddenly a hotspot for a certain type of crime. Okay, and community engagement is always key when we're doing this. Why? It's also for us to better understand from the stakeholders themselves what are some of the issues which are going on with regards to this specific crime. And then from there, we can also address some of the needs and concerns. Because one of the issues that you might face is that you might think that is necessary for that neighborhood based on the crime, but it's not something that the population or the general population would put into practice, right? So it's always very important for us to do that community engagement. And then the next thing, which is very important, we must talk about crime displacement. For most of us who might not understand what crime displacement is, it basically means is that if I sort out crime in this area, if I get rid of the criminals who are conducting maybe motorcycle theft in this area, are they going to now migrate to the next neighborhood? So how do we make sure that doesn't happen, right? So we have to analyze it properly to make sure whatever we are applying is actually going to either reduce it or combat it in total, not to say, okay, my area is clear, your area, that's your problem, right? So that's one of the reasons we have to also take into consideration crime displacement. The next thing is we definitely have to collaborate with other disciplines. As criminologists, we understand crime and CPTED from a certain perspective, but when it comes to certain applications, certain designs, it's always important that we work together with town planners, with architects, with landscape architects, with the M&E department, mechanical and engineering, the police. It's always, and of course the stakeholders, but these disciplines it's very important that we engage with these disciplines so that whatever we're applying is well-rounded, not just from my perspective, but it also has taken into consideration some of the advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons of the views of these other disciplines. Right? So it's so important that we engage them. And the last part of this process is, of course, to evaluate it afterwards. Once that has been complete, what is the next step moving forward? And also, basically, what you can do is sometimes go through that cycle again. So once that is done, if the crime rates have not decreased, then we go back to understanding and evaluating again, analyzing again. So this is probably like a loop that can be used to help reduce crime and theft. And just to share the reason why I showed you a video of how motorcycle theft happens. Again, like I said, it's one of the major concerns in Malaysia and the region as well. And when we did that project, we were called in to look into it, and it was a very successful one. We started off at a pilot project area. We were called in to look into a pilot project area. Instead of just sitting down and saying, hey, let me just design a motorcycle locking dock. No, we went through this process. And in the first year, we saw a decrease of motorcycle theft of 32%, right, in that pilot project area. So that's just to share, when you follow the process, it does yield proper results. So yeah, so this is what my sharing is about today. The 7 steps that usually I take as a criminologist to apply CPTED to yield effective results. Now back to you, Dr. Manjari. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shamir. That really piqued my curiosity. And if time permits, we would like to hear from you how exactly that crime reduction happened. But for now, the next order of the day is to call our third panelist, our very own executive director at the ICA, and the lady behind the technicals of the webinar is Matea Mihinjak. And she's a criminologist researcher from Slovenia. So we've gone around the globe. As you can see, we've done almost every region. She's certified in safe growth after studying criminal justice in Europe and Australia. She runs an ICA certification program, ICCP also. And without going further, Matea, over to you.
Thank you very much, Manjari, and thank you to my colleagues, to previous speakers. So Manjari mentioned at the start the definition of criminology. So basically the scientific study of crime, criminal causes of crime, and also ways of preventing them by identifying those causes and then preventing crime from occurring further, hopefully. But I think it's important to also mention that there's actually historically been slightly different orientation in terms of criminology and its development in Europe versus North America. Now, of course, the globalization, cross-pollination of ideas, these differences are probably less pronounced. But for example, traditionally in Europe, the developments but that basically were initially influenced by some of the philosophers like Beccaria and Bentham during the 18th, 19th centuries, led the development of classical criminology. Then Lombroso, anthropologists from Italy, kind of gave rise to that initial scientific criminology, so-called positivist criminology, because we could measure supposedly criminal traits. And then Hans Gross introduced criminalistics. So there's been influences basically from more legal and cultural differences throughout primarily continental Europe. UK has always been somewhat an anomaly because of the English-speaking background, but and different legal system, but continental criminology has been quite influenced by these different strains. And often criminology is actually considered also as part of the criminal justice system, or rather criminal justice studies that include penology, corrections, judicial system, and so on. And even in my country, for example, Institute of Criminology is under law university or law faculty. Whereas, of course, in North America, we probably know that the Chicago School of Criminology has kind of gave rise to criminology and its developments, and that was largely influenced by kind of more sociological views of crime and different structural things that were happening in the neighborhood. And Park and Burgess, Shaw and Mackay are some of the authors that kind of studied those individual and societal issues. And that, of course, gave rise to social ecology and ecology of crime, which are largely associated with studies of CPTED today. And I think this is important to note because kind of influenced how we probably practice crime prevention and CPTED still in Europe. It still appears to be largely in the domain of kind of more traditional experts, including, of course, the police. Some public-private partnerships have evolved over time, and now more and more also some of the community involvement has been basically considered. So that's good to see. Okay, so let me just share the screen. So just to kind of have a bit of a laugh. So when we kind of consider the work of a criminologist, people often consider this in their mind. So kind of crime scene investigation. This is often even promoted in the studies of criminology and textbooks. But in reality, it looks more like this, actually, often dealing with a large number of data, making sure that you analyze all the reports, research that's been there, consider what kind of information you need to collect, and similar. So there's a lot of time and research spent actually behind the computer. So yeah, so crime situation in Europe. So we're fairly lucky in Europe that we're actually not dealing with some major crime issues. There's been, of course, some more global transnational issues such as the war and illegal immigrations due to the war as well. But Europe has been traditionally fairly safe. This is from a few years ago, but the situation, at least in continental Europe, has not dramatically changed. And also in terms of perception of safety, we also feel fairly safe. So that's good to see. So for example, homicide rate in my country is at around 0.8 homicides per 100,000 population, which compared to some American cities that I worked in, for example, like this number can be 5 or 8 per 100,000. So quite a major difference. So violent crimes are slightly on the rise since 2021, despite the prior downward trend in violent crime. But most concerning is that actually more violence has been observed amongst the younger individuals. So the age of violence and the age of perpetrators of those acts has been decreasing. So that's somewhat concerning. So yeah. And of course, rising cybercrime, which is probably not isolated to Europe, and cyber child exploitation is on the rise as well, and that seems to be one of the major concerns in Europe. Okay, let's move on to CPTED. So Norma has kindly already mentioned and introduced, overviewed the 3 generations. So I will be very brief when it comes to that, but I do want to mention that I believe that we should be quite pragmatic when we consider CPTED. It's not a solution for everything. Especially, we often get asked like, how can CPTED assist in addressing illegal immigration, war, and some of those more transnational issues? We need to understand that CPTED primarily is micro and kind of meso level. So street block, individual places, and premises, and neighborhoods, cities. Those are kind of the scales for CPTED. So we need to be careful not to kind of overextend the reach of CPTED. So it has its use and it can assist, of course, when we consider it more on a local scale, but we need to break down the issue to actually understand how it's affecting those places and those communities we're dealing with. And I also believe that also the evidence shows that we can't divorce micro locations, so small areas that we're dealing with that are usually subject to first generation CPTED strategies from its wider environment. So which is usually the neighborhood and its social structures and social disadvantage or social contributions. So we need to be careful to not disregard what's happening in the surrounding environment as well. So those are kind of my points regarding first and second generation CPTED, but I do want to maybe spend a couple minutes on third generation CPTED because it's fairly new, but I do also want to kind of caution that it's an evolving theory. It's not necessarily set in stone yet. I would really call for more research and additional thinking behind the theory that my colleague Greg Seville has co-introduced with me in 2019. So we basically introduced this theory, third generation CPTED theory, as an integrated and holistic approach to preventing crime and understanding what's happening within the crime and the neighborhood. We also introduced another article last year that specifies some of the principles in some more detail. So but basically the main premise behind this theory is really that the framework we used is Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. So this is a psychological theory that talks about the needs kind of being divided into these more basic physiological needs for safety as basic needs, and then more social, slightly more advanced needs that are needs for belonging, needs for social interaction. Then at the higher level are those needs for self-actualization, self-transcendence, where you actually give back to the community, to others. So when you kind of have those basic and moderate level needs satisfied. And we also kind of connected this Maslow hierarchy of human needs to different generations of CPTED. So for example, the basic needs can be satisfied with first generation CPTED principles because it's about safety, physiology, making sure that you have access to some of those, make sure that some of those basic needs are satisfied in a safe way. And then with sociological aspects, second generation CPTED makes sure that we kind of build a community where we trust each other, where we feel like we belong to each other. So this is kind of the more second generation CPTED principles. And finally, the third generation CPTED is where we can really realize our highest level needs. So this is about opportunities to co-create, opportunities about realizing our potential, realizing our desires, and so on. So if we want to make sure that we feel like we belong to our neighborhood, we need to make sure that we have opportunities for, let's say, developing our own business in a local community, making sure that we build networks with the community, making sure that we actually are welcoming even to people coming from prisons to our community and integrate them back to the community to make it safe, to make it livable and inclusive for everyone. So this is kind of the idea where these more psychological needs are also considered within our living environment, because we feel like we're now craving, at least in more Western societies. I do want to acknowledge that this theory is probably more applicable to Western world and places where that kind of are also democratic. That's important to mention as well. So we see the importance of neighborhoods and living environments offering more than simply the satisfaction of basic needs, but opportunities to actually thrive and increase the quality of life. So that's the basic idea. If anyone would like to have articles that I mentioned earlier or any other articles we discuss in this session, please send me an email and I'll send them to you. Okay, so again, we kind of translated this into different levels of neighborhoods. I mentioned the basic level neighborhoods are those that would best satisfy the basic level needs, so physiological, safety. Moderate level needs are those more social needs, and advanced neighborhoods are those that allow for co-creation for development of these higher level human desires and needs. So this is kind of how these different CPTED generations fit into satisfaction of those needs. And CPTED 3, third generation CPTED, has 4 sustainability principles that were introduced in the last year's article. So economic sustainability, social sustainability, public health sustainability, and environmental sustainability. Okay, so just kind of to shortly end up, because I know I'm kind of going over my time. I think criminologists actually excel in crime analysis. So I think this is something that we're probably fairly strong in because we get that training during our studies. So I believe that a competent CPTED practitioner or professional actually needs to have those skills, because they need to have a thorough understanding of the problem before we can actually devise solutions. And we need to be careful because sometimes CPTED professionals actually may give insufficient attention to this step. They may not actually understand the problem well enough to develop solutions. They may use CPTED checklists. They may disregard the kind of the social context or the environmental context. They may disregard the local community that they are actually affecting, or sometimes some decisions or solutions are even can be sometimes even, I don't want to say illegal, but sometimes non-ethical. So we need to be careful with that. And this is also why with the ICA, we have actually developed the ICCP program. I'm running the program. I wasn't there when it was developed, but I strongly support it because I believe that those are the basic competencies that a competent CPTED practitioner should actually have. So, for example, knowing how to scope the task of the project, making sure that they work in the multidisciplinary team to make sure that they understand and hear different perspectives. Of course, we mentioned the analysis, collecting information, undertake research in the nominated environment, and then, of course, analyze it before finally developing solutions. So these are only some of the competencies that are included in our program. But the idea is to really recognize the skills, knowledge, and experience that a certain practitioner has to then support them and give them accreditation of being a CPTED professional by the ICA, because we want to make sure that we professionalize the field, and those who might need some more assistance, we will also offer some assistance through mentorship. So yes, so I think criminologists probably have some advantage over maybe some other professionals, not necessarily, but based on my experience, that is the case. And of course, we kind of included, okay, this is from one of the projects where there's a multidisciplinary team working together. So we have police at the table, people from local government, then people from local organizations, and the residents, of course, and they exchange information, knowledge, ideas to really do detailed problem solving. So that's, again, working together in multidisciplinary teams. Here, there's actually locally collected information about the shootings, or homicides, actually. These are homicide shootings, shooting homicides. So these are actually location of those events that are collected by local people, by residents living there. And then that was then superimposed onto the map collected regarding the land use and bus stations to actually identify the overlap or any correlation between land use and homicides. And this is, again, important. And why I mention this is because I think it's important not to only rely on crime data, which often has limitations, which we probably know about, like dark figure of crime, crimes not being reported, inconsistent reporting, and so on. So it's important to be able to collect, for CPTED practitioner to collect some of their own data and data with actually their partners, such as the partners mentioned here in the first picture. Then one of the main methods that I actually use with my Safe Growth team as well when we work with communities is a safety audit, which is actually a way of collecting information relating to perception of safety or so the fear within the community or certain areas within the neighborhood. And why this is so powerful is because now we can actually also digitize that data. We can use an app, and this is basically from a project that I was involved in Saskatoon in Canada in the downtown center. So we collected some information related to perception of safety during daytime and nighttime, and then we related that to crime incidents to see, is there a correlation, is there not, what is happening actually in certain spots, why are perceptions so different at night. So we can see, for example, dark green areas because of lots of activities along this main route, like during daytime, and because of the shopping center here, despite this being a hotspot during the day, it's actually perception is much higher compared to daytime when this is an isolated street, but there's actually nothing happening there. So social environment is actually a very strong contributor to issues. So apart from crime data, safety audits, working with local community, it's also very important to collect information about demographics of the area, conducting site visits, observations, interviews, surveys, and also developing maybe some additional ways of collecting data. So for example, this is also a map that includes these perceptions of safety locations, but also checks for lamp type. So we actually went out in the field and collected information about the type of lamp used to see, do we actually want to consider changing the type of lamp because it doesn't offer sufficient lighting or color rendition index or something similar. So high pressure sodium, LED lights, and metal halide lamps, for example, were used, and we went out in the field and collected our own information and information about, for example, vacant properties. These were vacant stores. Quite a few were actually vacant, and we then correlated that information to perceived safety around those areas at daytime and nighttime. Yeah, okay. I went a bit too long, so I'll end here. So over to you, Manjari. Thank you.
Thank you, Matea. That was extremely illuminating for me, because this is the first brush I have with criminology per se, and it's very, very interesting. I can definitely give you that. And now I'm very happy to say that we already are receiving lots and lots of questions, and I invite all of you to please share in your questions now. So we'll plunge right into our Q&A session. And since Matea, you are still there on, let's start with some questions which have come in for you. I won't barrage you with questions. Just the last one, which is very pertinent since it's part of your narrative. So I thought I'll ask that question right away. This is from Terence Love from Australia. He asks, how do you see that you will apply third generation CPTED in times of societal collapse? I'm assuming that is important at a deep level, but the question is what ideas you have about practical ways to apply third generation and social collapse, including social, economic, and governance failure and transitions.
Thank you, Terence, for this question. Well, I don't know, social collapse. It sounds quite kind of dystopian. But I think, I mean, that's why we think it's so, if we're kind of considering social collapse in terms of traditional agencies that are leading us, but we don't necessarily have trust in them or don't, work with them that well, then this calls even more for this type of more community engaged approaches to practicing CPTED. So I think there needs to be a lot of power transfer to local communities. I think there need to be lots of collaborations. I don't necessarily see that it will lead to any fast social collapse per se, but there may be things getting worse before they get better. But I definitely think there's opportunities for us to work on some of those sustainability principles that we mentioned, and I think they're exactly the answer to those issues that I think are kind of probably considered as part of this social collapse potential. So I know I was going in circles a little bit, but I actually see it as an answer rather than a limitation of helping with this transition, maybe.
Yeah, that should be good enough for now, Matea. Maybe we can have a discussion on this later. And I'll give you a breather. There are some more questions for you, but I'll give you a breather in the meanwhile. I'll take the next question to Shamir. Shamir, first I'll just add a bit of a question myself. Pardon my ignorance. Not being from this field, maybe I'm asking a very dumb and a silly question, but I'm just asking also on behalf of others who may be, the uninitiated into the world of criminology. I heard in your discourse something about crime displacement theory, and I've been asked that question sometimes by my people of my fraternity. Now, what I want to understand what is wrong with the crime, with crime displacement. I mean, after all, everywhere once we've prevented crime from happening everywhere, then obviously crime will be prevented. So, what exactly is that theory, and what exactly is wrong with that? That's the first part of the question, and then I'll come to the main question.
Okay, what is wrong with crime displacement? I've never thought that. Thank you very much for the question. Well, from a consultant's perspective, crime displacement is actually a good problem to have. Because once you start a crime here, then you just go to the next neighborhood and say, hey, I know you have a problem. Because those guys have come over and now just double my earnings. But of course, why is crime displacement such an important thing to handle? Is because we don't want to basically throw our problems to someone else. At the end of the day, you've got just say a pretty good neighborhood. You've been living in a pretty good neighborhood, and suddenly you see crime from a neighboring area suddenly starts seeping in. It's not a problem that you would want to have. So I don't think it should be wished upon another person. So that's the main idea of crime displacement. Is the idea of CPTED is, of course, to reduce crime, not to just take it out of one area and put it into another area. And that is why, as criminologists, when we look into any sort of application, we want to make sure that we are actually solving a problem and not just giving that problem to someone else.
Okay. So that part is, of course, clear. I thought there was something bigger that we were kind of missing. Okay. So the real question is from Ana Neves. She says, how can evidence demonstrate crime has decreased instead of displaced after implementing CPTED methodology?
Okay. One of the ways, of course, is there are two ways to it. One, of course, by looking at a GIS system, right? GIS crime mapping. When you would see, I believe most countries have very good applications of it. And when we look at it from an analytic perspective, you can see, okay, after we've applied this CPTED strategy, and if we are relating back to crime displacement, has the neighboring areas suddenly had a boom in maybe motorcycle theft, right? Has there been a boom? If there isn't, then that's probably a good thing. But also this goes back to why we say it's very important to work with the other disciplines. The police in the area generally know what is happening, right? And if we take those statistics at the crime mapping and we go to the police and say, hey, can I know if the people who have been committing motorcycle theft or the syndicates which have been committing motorcycle theft in this area, have they moved to the neighboring areas? And if the answer is no, then that's a very good sign. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, if you don't mind, there is one more question on a similar theme. Are you tired, or can you
No,
take
no, no,
that?
please go ahead. I can take
Okay,
that.
it just came in, so I thought it makes sense to kind of complete the discussion. So
Yeah.
this is from Adrian Gracia. He says, what has been done on the areas where CPTED has been implemented and crime activity was displaced? This is acknowledged in the second generation, but not clear what strategies were used or given examples on that. Any additional info will be
What has been
appreciated.
done on the areas where CPTED has been declared and crime activity was displaced? Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to read that question again.
Yeah, please do that. Yeah.
What has been done on the area where CPTED has been implemented and crime activity was displaced? Okay, so unfortunately, I cannot speak out of experience. I've never been in such a situation. Maybe if there are any other of the other criminologists that have been involved in this, maybe I believe either Matea or Dr. Norma would have a better answer. But I'm sorry, I've never been
So
in such a...
Matea's raised her hand, so I think I'll take the question then.
Yeah, I guess it was more related to the previous point, but yeah, I mean, I think often we're probably not in, as criminologists, we often either do research post fact, right, to post festum, to actually analyze what happened years later when we kind of get those crime statistics to analyze. Or we're not involved in the project anymore that we've been involved in. So unless they call us back and say, you know, that's been an issue, then we sometimes don't know. But ideally, I mean, we need to make sure that we tweak the solutions. If we have, you know, basically made wrong decisions regarding our strategy, we need to make sure we go back. Like, it's not, we can't just let the problem go out of proportion. We need to make sure that we detect it early enough. That's why it's so important to monitor anything. Any projects that we implement need to be monitored over, you know, for any major basically fluctuations or out of order events. But I also want to mention that, of course, Amir mentioned the use of GIS to analyze the data. Certainly, we also need to acknowledge there may be other types of displacement, right? We know tactical displacement, where we know that with the emergence of new technologies, you know, perpetrators may use different ways of committing crimes, or, for example, lots of crimes have now used in the cyberspace, in virtual environments. So that basically could be tactical displacement, right? If there's motivation to commit crime and provide livelihood for yourself that way, then you'll be motivated to change your routines and your ways of committing something. And I think there's actually a good article that talks about also the dark side of displacement, because often we hear that displacement is not really happening, that there's often diffusion of benefits. There's actually one article by Hodgkinson, Seville, and Anderson that talks about diffusion of detriment, where actually issues have gotten worse after the fast food place was shut down and then demolished because it was such a major hotspot in the city center in one of the Canadian cities. What they have actually done to explore and find out that actually the issue has gotten displaced and worse was actually that they didn't just rely on basically geographic data. They luckily had course for service. They actually used course for service because they found them more useful than basically crime data, because course for service can often talk about also the issues that concern people, but may not actually be then recorded as a criminal event. So that's why course for service. And then they also did ride along. So they observed what was happening. They found that the same people who were there 2 years prior around that fast food place were now hanging out a few kilometers away around the motel that became a new major hotspot, and crime was escalating. So, for example, doing observations, qualitative interviews, the police interviews, they also interviews the individuals who were actually dealing with the problems a few years prior around that fast food place. So it's important to kind of use these different sources of data as well to see, you know, to confirm that the problem is real and that we need to deal with it, and whether we're dealing with 5 individuals who are accounting for the majority of crime and we can deal with them in a simpler manner, or not simpler manner necessarily, but more targeted approaches, or do we need to have a more widespread approach? So it's very important, again, to understand the reasons, why has something displaced and where, and all the kind of underlying reasons. Again, analysis.
Thank you, Matea. I hope that answers the questions we were talking about, Anna and Adrian. Okay, so I'll take the next question to Dr. Norma. Norma, this is a question from Mary Tompkins. She says, what initiatives have taken place in Mexico to make women feel safe navigating the community? You mentioned murals as a placemaker. Is this true?
Hello, Mary Thompson, and everybody. Thank you for your question. Definitely, there is many to do in Mexico for the women's security and she felt safety. This case is real about the murals in a place in Mexico. It was implemented by Macarena Rao, and the murals was created to promote women felt safety, because in the moment the women crossed this place, she felt insecurity. There is two kinds of security: objective security and perception or insecurity. Or in these cases, the place had a reduce of crime, but women felt insecure. And the idea for this plan was paint the murals to increase the sense of security or perception of security of the women. But there are many things to do at the moment. It's not the only strategy. It's necessary to have a ecosystemic vision. Remember, the third generation are the highest level of the Maslow hierarchy, and for to arrive to this level, it's necessary to satisfy basic needs before. And in Mexico, there are many work to do. Ted.
Okay, thank you, Norma. There's a related question, so I think it's best that you answer that along with this. And the question says, what differences does CPTED for women have in relation to CPTED in general?
Yes, it's important for CPTED the gender perspective, because different between women and men are very important. The role is different for women and men as a victim, as a criminal. And it's important consider, because the strategies will be better if you consider this difference. For example, in the case we take about the CPTED guide and the construction of spaces, the view of women are basic for this construction. Then women, I say the women are the best thermometers of the perception or insecurity, because CPTED take the perception of women to decide a master plan for CPTED, because the perception of insecurity are better in women than the men. And this is very important, and this is a basic difference to consider in accepted with gender perspective and not in a general sector.
Very well answered, Norma. Actually, I had also read somewhere in my limited understanding of the subject that a place that is safe for women and children would be safe for everybody. So that they are, like you said, a very good yardstick to kind of measure by. Okay, so moving on to the next question. I will now, Matea, it's your turn again. Okay, so I'll take, there are quite a few questions. I'll start with the one from Patrick McCulley. For Matea, how can law enforcement professionals best seek out collaborative partners to help, and what standards, including ICA certification, should they look for?
Hey, Patrick, thank you for that question. And Patrick is certified with the ICA, by the way, as well. Yeah, I mean, it often comes probably down to what they're also trying to achieve. I mean, if you're really trying to have a more inclusive, socially inclusive type of project or community, then you're probably going to want to make sure that you find partners that can realize that vision, right? And you in the capacity of chief of police, I would definitely, suggest to surround yourself with partners that can realize that vision, and that could be nonprofits, local community, like the direct relationships with the representatives or kind of gatekeepers of certain neighborhoods or communities. I think that would be a good way to approach it, right? And often you're limited with what you can find or what you know or whom you know about in your city. So I don't know, word of, sometimes you can get referrals from individuals about those partners that might be best to work with to achieve those objectives. And what standards they should look for? Well, it often comes down to also the kind of resume, what kind of maybe project they have worked on, or maybe their background or views. I don't know, maybe it also comes down to, kind of informal interviewing of individuals to make sure that they actually align with realizing your objectives. So I don't know if Shamir and Norma have anything to add to this.
No, I've got nothing to add. I think you covered quite a bit.
It's good for me too.
Okay, since you're there, Shamir, I'll take the next question to you. This is Jerome Knapp. He's asking, how have newer approaches to place-based crime analysis, such as risk terrain modeling, changed how CPTED is implemented in projects you have participated in?
You're asking about risk terrain modeling?
Yeah, he says, how have newer approaches to place-based crime analysis, such as risk terrain modeling, changed how CPTED is implemented in projects you have participated in? Do you think it has, risk terrain modeling has changed how CPTED is implemented?
I'm sorry, I think I'll have to pass this question to another one of my colleagues.
Okay, sure.
I'm not familiar
Anybody
with
else would
what
like to
risk
take
terrain
that
modeling is.
question, Norma or Matea? Okay, so maybe the question requires a little bit more of clarity. I'll go on to the next question. This is from Dinesh Ilangovan. What are the challenges you face that you would like to highlight, share, and when you try to share and implement your ideas for crime prevention and reduction? Is it architects, government agencies, or any other reasons? What are your recommendations? Shamir, that's for you.
This is from Ruby Tamayo, since we recognize that criminals.
No, this is from Dinesh Ilangovan. This is from Dinesh Ilangovan.
Okay. What are the
challenges you face to highlight, share, and implement your ideas for crime prevention and reduction? Do you face Is it architects, government agencies, or any other reasons? What are your recommendations?
Okay, I think most of the time, a lot of people might say it's architects. I have faced some challenges with architects as well, but I understand their perspective of it, because especially when they design something, it's like their baby. And then we go in there and say, no, you change this and you change that. And I can understand their reluctance at times. So I think it's very important that we all have to understand, especially when it comes to different disciplines and agencies, that it's not you against me, it's you and me against the problem. I think that's one thing we have to understand. So whenever I work in with a multidisciplinary team, I always tell them, I say, look, from the start, we are not each other's enemies. We need to work together. One of the things I think with government agencies is always, they say, oh, red tape, red tape, red tape. There's always that issue, which at some point tends to be a bit annoying, because you are called in to try to solve an issue, and suddenly there are restrictions which are put in. Either somebody doesn't want to do that work, or there's just more extra paperwork, and then it suddenly boils down to, oh, we don't have the budget for it, or this is going to be expensive, so on and so forth. So one of the things that I always say is that if we talk about budgets, then let's look at what is it currently costing us every year with these crime rates compared to what it could cost us in 10 years, right? If we are looking at proper implementations. So those are some of my challenges which I faced, and some of the recommendations which I've used.
Thanks, Shamir. I hope, Dinesh, your question is answered. I'll go on to the next question, which would be for Dr. Norma. Norma, our President Macarena wants to know how to apply CPTED in an extreme territory of narco traffic and organized crime, like we see very often in Latin America.
Thank you for Macarena, to Macarena for your question. This is a very complex question. And Macarena works in this situation, in these cases. This is narco traffic is a very hard reality in Mexico, in Latin America too. For these cases, is apply a very specific methodology of CPTED, is CPTED stream or stream CPTED, and Macarena is now working in Chile with groups or communities with this problem. She create peace cells to help victims of the narco traffic, and spaces to the people feel more secure, because the community are taken covered by the narco traffic. And this example reply in some communities in Mexico too. It's all I think is necessary a hard work in these senses, because there is no simple answer to this situation, and I repeat, it's necessary to have a ecosystemic vision and take the different levels of the ecosystemic, the macrostructure, the microstructure to apply activities in the different levels: social, community, interactionist, and psychosocial prevention too. It's a very, very big work is necessary, and a very complex intervention too.
Thank you, Norma. That is very well answered.
I'm sorry, I want to tell something. talk about
sure,
that?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a question there is in the chat about the intervention in third generation. There is an article in the criminological construct about the third generation and cases in which was applied the third generation for to promote the health, the mental health for post-pandemic stress. I recommend that, and I can take the link to consult the article.
So you can just put the link in the answer. I think you're referring to the question from Anna Veronica Neves, so you can just put the link in the answer for that, Norma, and she can take that up for and read that for the answer. Thank you, Norma, for that answer. And I'll move on to the next question because we are soon going to be out of time. And I want to field as many questions as possible. We have many which are still pending. Matea, I'll take this question to you. It's from Manuel Lopez. He says, Matea, thank you for your comprehensive presentation on the interplay between safety perceptions and variables such as lighting type and building vacancy rate. My question is, might these relationships be bidirectional? And if they are, how might we empirically determine the direction of this interdependency? Very technical question.
Hey, Manuel is also certified with us. Yeah, so he's basically asking, oh, you just removed the question. Okay, so bidirectionality basically means it's not going one way, but that there's a relationship going both ways. So if I understand correctly, then, for example, poor perception might influence vacant storefronts and vacant stores might influence poor perception. How can we then, well, there's definitely, I mean, there's multiple analysis, right? I mean, there could be statistical analysis as well. I'm not sure if we can measure for bidirectionality. And I think that's often an issue we have with social research, because we have to reduce our questions to be able to analyze it to, you know, like a limited number of variables to be able to understand what's happening. So how can you account for everything? I mean, there's obviously more sophisticated statistical analysis that can maybe determine some of that, and you can control for some factors in some analysis, but I actually think that's, yeah, it definitely has limitations. So yeah, I mean, you can probably find correlation, test the different hypotheses and determine whether they, you know, whether they kind of confirm your hypothesis or not. And graphical analysis, I think, also can be valuable, probably as a scanning tool, and then more sophisticated statistical analysis. But again, I wouldn't rely just on that source of data. I think you always need to have multiple sources of data, triangulate, and see what the whole picture tells you. That's why I think it's so important to basically to incorporate different information, like mentioned several times. I know I'm repeating myself, but yeah, I wouldn't rely just on that particular source. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Manuel.
Yeah, thank you, Matea. Shamir, coming back to you, there are two questions which are linked directly to your presentation, and it's also my question added to that. We wanted to hear more about your experiment that you shared. So first is a question from Elizabeth Miller. It says, Shamir, what was the recommendation of the local experts during your public engagement, and what exactly did you do to reduce the theft? And the second question is now missing.
I think it's by Mary, right? I've actually answered
Mary
it.
Tompkins. Yeah.
Yes, I've actually
so you've
answered
read that
it.
question. If you can just read it out, and
not a problem.
Have you answered it?
I've typed out the answers,
I found the question. Let me just. Yeah, I have the question in front of me. I'll just ask you that. So it says, Dr. Shamir, you mentioned you reduced theft of the motorcycles by 30%. Did your jurisdiction add parking for motorcycles or produce locking mechanisms to the motorcycle change the perception of the public around the theft of the motorcycle by bringing awareness? What? And I add to that my own question, that exactly how did they achieve the change in scenario? So all on
Okay.
one.
Thank you very much. So this goes back to the cycle which I shared earlier, right? On how things are usually done. So of course, when we talk about motorcycle theft, we first have to understand, what type. There are many different types of motorcycles in Malaysia, which are the ones which are actually being stolen. And then we have to understand how are these bikes getting stolen? What makes these motorcycles easy access to be stolen, and why are they able to get away with it? When we understood those, and again, when we say, you mentioned earlier, and it's always in my profile that I work at the grassroots of crime. What I mean by that is also that means we try to get in touch with people who have done these sort of crimes before, right? So we try to get in touch with offenders. So it's not just so much as when we talk about preventive measures, we always think we know best. We have to go down to the experts which are actually doing it. So one of the things that we also did was we actually sat down with offenders who actually stole motorcycles and say, hey, how are you guys stealing this? And they explained to us the process behind it. And then again, it goes back to, okay, going back to the stakeholder, telling them, okay, these are some of the issues we've identified. If we were to put designated motorcycle parking areas, where would be an area do you think that would be suitable? So they gave their suggestions. We looked at it based on our suggestions as well. We mapped it out and said, okay, there are certain areas which we find commonalities in it. Again, we cannot simply put it in certain areas because sometimes, we've got other street vendors over there and all, and we don't want any sort of enragement from the public as well. And then we designed a designated parking dock, which also means that we looked into a very specific mechanism on how these bikes are going to be locked in there. And then we worked together with the police. We created a dialogue for the neighborhood as well, for the community there as well. Also, one part of it was there was a bit of an increase in police presence as well. So this was some of the processes that we went through, right? Of course, again, that's why we say it's very important for us to engage with the police as well, because then we needed to follow up with them and say, hey, the guys who are stealing the bikes here, what's happening with them? Of course, bikes still do get stolen, but it's not as much. It reduced by 30%. Again, I never say I've ever been in a project where we've reduced crime 100%, and I would never ever make that claim. But yeah, this was a project that I was part of, and we were able to do it by that process to say.
Okay, so I hope all our questions are answered for Elizabeth Miller and Mary, and I can speak for myself, of course. Okay, so Norma, next question to you. This would hopefully be the last question to you. There's a question from Ruby Tamayo. And it says, actually, any of you can answer. So I'll go to Norma first, and then if any of you have any thoughts on that, we can come back to you. Since we recognize that criminals freely commit crimes due to factors attributed to structural design of a certain place or locality, I think what probably Ruby means is architectural design or the environmental design of a certain place or locality. What can you suggest then to our government in charge of building these structures? So this is very related to my area, so I am more intrigued by this question. Okay, Norma. Norma, you need to unmute yourself, please.
I'm sorry. This is a very interesting question from Ruby, and it's very common in Mexico and in other places. In the neighborhood, there is very big fabric, industrial employee, and there is a very long way without surveillance. And there are houses in the middle of a very big space without surveillance. No lights, no cameras, no only formal surveillance, natural surveillance, And this is a very common problem because women transit across these big places or long places and feel insecurity, and they are insecure too. And it's necessary to do different activities like put lights, peatonal cross, banks, cameras. In the third generation, it's necessary to stores for I'm sorry, for the food, for satisfy all the necessaries, all the needs, I'm sorry, of the people. And it is a very common problem here in at the north of Mexico. It is necessary designed places more kindly for the persons, and more sure.
So that's exactly the question. We already know surveillance is important as mooted by a first generation of CPTED. The question is, what does the government do for this? In your knowledge and interest, yeah.
The government. Macarena is a pioneer in this sense in Latin America. There are many. Macarena is very frequently asked to consider her opinion about the projects in Mexico, in Zacatecas, in another place of the country, in Cancun, and in another places, in Macarena, like a woman. And like an architect suggests ideas for the construction of different places. But the opinion of CPTED experts is very recently. Mexico is ahora taken this opinion, but in the past, CPTED isn't known in Latin America. And
right.
The incorporating to the strategies of the government is very recently, but currently is applied in Mexico.
Great. So that is similar to the conditions in, I think, most Asian countries, right, Shamir? So, I'll now just the last two questions, I think, for the day. Matea, I'll ask you your last question. So this is again from Elizabeth. It says, Matea, how important do you feel it is for a team to include a criminologist when conducting a CPTED review? Secondarily, if you don't have access to one, what can a team do to compensate for this, or can they?
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Again, another certified member and director, our secretary. So what I would actually say, it depends how good of a reviewer you have. Because I mean, even a criminologist can not be a good CPTED reviewer. So there's no guarantee, right? I mean, I mentioned that maybe criminologists have some advantage in maybe analyzing data, but that doesn't make them good CPTED professionals necessarily. So I think it's just important to have a good CPTED professional or review team. And then also, yeah, I mean, it's important to train, to have skilled professionals who can conduct this review. And maybe also, it might also depend on the extent of the problem you find. So, or even how big the problem is expected to be, because I think one of the advantages maybe also of a criminologist is that because maybe we know some criminological theories, we can actually know what information to collect and to look for. So that could be maybe also another advantage, whereas maybe an architect maybe who's not necessarily trained, and no offense, Manjari, but just an architect who's maybe not necessarily trained in criminological thinking and theory maybe miss some of those questions that relate to causes of crime, or that can basically induce some of the issues. So that was just an example, basic example. So yeah, I would say it depends. It's not a one size fits all, Elizabeth. I think.
Yeah, well answered, Matea. And I'll go last to Shamir now for a very, very interesting question. Different take on everything that we've been discussing. Shamir, can you share examples of CPTED strategies that have gone wrong?
All right. Okay. I know this is probably different from what we've been chatting about the whole night.
And you're on a happy note, eh?
Yeah. No, but maybe I'll just share an example of one of the cases in Malaysia. So there was an area which, of course, you had a lot of foot traffic on two sides of the road. On one side, because the other side was very dark, it was not well lit. So people rarely walked on that side. And what happened was these town planners went in and they spoke to the neighborhood, and they said, oh, we hardly walk on that side of the road because it's not well lit. So what the town planners did and the municipal council did was they put up very nice street lighting, LED lights, they put it up. And suddenly crime rate shot up. And everybody was like, what, how did this happen? So what was happening that again, because there was no real analysis done, somebody just looked at the area and said, oh, it's dark, let's put lights, which sometimes comes down to the CPTED theories, right? Or when we talk about lighting.
Yeah.
And they just said, let's just put lights there. And what they did not realize was that because that area was dark, it was actually a place where a lot of criminals used to just hang out, right? People just sit down there. And now that they put lights, these criminals did not move. So every time people passed by the area, people kept getting bugged in that area. So this is why sometimes when we talk about, and we always hear this, CPTED easy. Yeah, the four basic, you just need to do the four basic areas of CPTED and we are done. So that's why, we always talk about it's so important to have a multidisciplinary team. And that is why it's one of the main units in the ICTP to have that, so that you don't just make assumptions of CPTED. If CPTED was easy, I think everybody will be doing it. And I think our association will be much, much larger. but yeah, this is an example of how the perception that you've applied CPTED and how it goes wrong.
Okay, that was interesting. That was very interesting, and I hope our viewers found it as interesting as I did. It was definitely very revealing. I got an insight into a realm that till date was only a mystery for me. So we're coming to the close of this webinar now, and on behalf of ICA, I heartily thank our honorable panel for sharing their extensive knowledge, their experiences, their insights with all of us today. I'd also like to thank, most importantly, our viewers. We hope that you found today's webinar insightful, exciting like I did, intriguing, and look forward to you joining us again for our future webinars. At this juncture, it's very important for me to add that in another another 23 days, our conference comes up in Brazil. I hope all of you have your travel arrangements done, or you are registering and joining us online, whatever be the case. Please join us, and I will end this session from my end and hand it over to our executive director and technical person to finish the webinar for the day. Thank you so much, and thanks for being an excellent and very, very well-informed audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manjari, and thank you to Norma and Shamir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Thank you. So before we say goodbye for today, just a few notes. And I have already included some links in the chat, so please feel free to use them. And including the link to the survey of this webinar. So please leave a survey and you will also receive a certificate of attendance if you do so. So a quick few announcements. So Manjari just mentioned the conference. So here is the kind of the poster for our conference happening at the end of October. You're welcome to use the link to get some more information and also to find a link to register for the conference that will happen in Brazil. There's also another conference happening, and I think they have extended their early bird rates until 15th of October of this month for Brussels. So this is by EFUS, European Forum for Urban Security. So our colleagues from EFUS are holding their annual conference in Brussels in March next year. So feel free to register for that. Again, I invite you to join us to take advantage of regular emails about events, the accepted courses, get also discount to the conference and so on. So please do join us. Membership is open to everyone. Also, if you would like to get some more information regarding our certification program, please use this link or contact us or email me directly as well. I can leave my email. Actually, my email is in the bio, so maybe you can use that one. And also, we have a course accreditation program, which is linked to certification program. So if you'd like to know more, please read about that. But this isn't meant for course instructors who would like to accredit their course by the ICA. So yes, thank you very much again for joining us. Stay safe. We'll see you next time, and be well, everyone. And we hope to see most of you in Brazil. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you.
Of course, follow us on social media as well. Thank you.